So you just got an ukulele, you're wondering what in the world to do with it? Here are some tips and tricks to help get you started and get you understanding what's actually happening underneath the hood of a fretted instrument, like the ukulele. My name is Brad Bordessa from liveukulele.com. I've been playing ukulele for about 20 years and teaching for almost as long. I'm an honors graduate of the Institute of Hawaiian Music and have been performing for a very long time and teaching for a very long time, and hopefully have some valuable tips to pass on to you for your very first ukulele lesson to help you get your foot in the door and understand some things that are often left out of other Quickstart ukulele lessons. Before we begin, check the info box down below for more lessons, video courses, ebooks, mailing list sign up so you can stay up to date, essential gear, stuff that I recommend, all that good stuff. Anything that you do down there helps support the channel and keeps free content like this coming out on a regular basis. Thank you so much. So the ukulele is a fretted instrument, which means it is tuned to a certain pitch that we'll talk about in a second. And when you press your finger down in one of these fret spaces, the frets are the metal wires that go across, or maybe if you have a plastic ukulele, it's a little raised plastic bump. When you press your finger down in the space between them, you're pulling the string into contact with the higher of these two frets. So if I press down on the second fret space, I'm causing the string that runs up and up and up to break over the edge of this second fret. So we have 1, 2 metal frets. If we press down on the second fret space, we're actually causing the string to terminate and stop right here on the second metal fret wire. That's how you change the pitch, because the length of the ringing string is how you determine the pitch. At a given tension that the string is tuned to, if you shorten the string, it's gonna go up in pitch. So all the math is done for you and your frets are aligned, going smaller and smaller as you get higher so that they stay in tune and you play nice notes that fit with Western music all the way up the fretboard. To get started playing, what you can do just to kind of get a feel for the mechanics of it is you can play on the bottom string, and when you pick single notes, a lot of times you're gonna pick downwards with your thumb. So your thumb touches the string and then you just drop your hand and the thumb towards the floor. And if you pick on that open string on the bottom, you're gonna get a sound, whatever it's tuned to. To begin raising the pitch and bringing the notes higher and higher, you're gonna move your hand up the fretboard holding down a fret each time. So you could play the open string, and then you could press on the first fret. It's not gonna be necessarily the best musical sound, but you start getting an idea of how to press down the fret and what makes it work. So a lot of times people will just tell you press in the fret space. What you wanna focus on a little bit is even within the fret space, there's variation. And a lot of times if you bring your finger higher inside the fret space, because whether you're playing low in the fret space with your finger or high in the fret space, it doesn't change the note. It remains the same pitch because we're still terminating the string at the fret wire. That's our tuning, that's our set tuning. All we're doing is adjusting the mechanics. So if your finger goes a little bit higher in the fret space, it causes the string to break steeper over the fret wire, and it's gonna give the string less opportunities to bounce off and down, which is what happens when you get a buzz. So when you get that rattle sort of sound on the note, it's because the string is hopping on and off of the fret. So you can either press harder where you're at, or a lot of times all you have to do is you just move your finger up a little bit within the fret space. So your finger is kind of nudging up against that higher fret wire. Higher on the ukulele is gonna be towards this bridge here. With that in mind, if you pay attention to pressing a little bit higher, you can walk up the strings and walk up the string and practice picking that note and increasing the pitch. And all I'm doing is just using my thumb in a downwards motion to create that sound every time. So what you don't want to do is you don't want to hook the string with your fingernail. Even if you have a short fingernail, some people try and do this, you don't want to hook it and snap. That's always going to give you a bad sound. Instead, what you want to do is you touch the string with the pad of your finger and then drop it down through. And if you have a fingernail, the last thing to touch the string is often going to be that fingernail. And you'll roll off with the fingernail. But you always want to start by touching with the pad of your picking finger. So in this case, it's the thumb. that's a nice exercise. You just go 1 fret at a time, walk your way up to get a feel for how to press the actual frets. In order to make your ukulele sound musical, either with itself or with a group of people, you have to tune it to a specific set of notes. Most chord diagrams or instructions that you're going to find across the internet, they're all going to be assuming that your ukulele is tuned to a specific standard of notes. And these notes are G, C, E, A. Goats can eat anything. That's how I like to remember it. And there's 2 styles of tuning. One, like this ukulele, is with a low G, where you have a deep sound and the G is the lowest note in the range. So you're gonna go from low and step your way up higher, higher, higher as you move through the strings. Other ukuleles can be tuned with what's called a high G, and this G is 1 octave higher than the low G, and it starts high. And then from there, you're gonna drop down, and then you rise again. This is called reentrant tuning. This is called linear tuning. Whether or not you have the low G or the high G, you're still tuning to a G. These tunings are an octave apart, but if I try and tune this G string all the way down to the next octave, I can kind of do it, but the string is super duper flabby. And it's not going to be very easy to play. So I want to make sure I'm in the right range with the right tension. And unless you have a broken string in your ukulele when you open it up, you're usually going to be in the ballpark of how tight the strings should be. So hopefully you're close as you get started. But whether you're close or not, you're probably going to have a tuner of some sort. Maybe you have a clip-on tuner, or maybe you have an app on your phone such as this, okay? And what it tells you is that on the left side, if the needle is to the left, you're flat. And if the needle is to the right, you're sharp. And what's displayed is the tuner listens to the pitch of the note that's coming in, so you sometimes have to be kind of close to it, and you have to be in a room that's not super loud. If you have a clip-on tuner, you don't have to worry about any of that because it is just feeling the vibrations that come through the headstock of the ukulele. So by picking, it's going to display the pitch of the string that is happening. Okay? From there, if my string is flat, it might be on another note, or certainly the needle will be to the left. So in this case, I'm on an F sharp, which I know in my head is 1 note lower than G. So I just need to go up to get to the G that I need to be at. If you don't have this information in your head though, it's going to be helpful to look at a chromatic scale. And the chromatic scale is just all of the notes in Western music laid out in a row. There's 12 of them, and it can help you navigate and know, okay, so maybe I'm on F and I need to go to G. You'll be able to see that's the closest distance. I just need to go 2 notes higher. And from there, when you go to adjust your tuner, if I'm on F sharp, if I go higher to the next note, you can see the needle jumps up to the right, so I'm going sharp on F sharp, but then it's gonna switch to the next note, and on that next note, it'll actually be flat because you're low on that following note. So in this case, I'm low on G, but I'm on the right note. I just need to get the needle to be in the center so that I'm on pitch. So you could just pick repeatedly, let it ring out for maybe a second each time that you pick the string so the tuner has a chance to register what that is. So you just tighten or loosen your tuning peg to get the needle to be in the center, and right there I'm pretty close. For my next string, I'm gonna pretend it's tuned to high. And I've just gotten my ukulele. I can feel that the string is pretty tight. It's a similar tightness to the rest of the strings. So I know that I must be close. So I'm going to, okay, look at my tuner, C sharp. I'm on a C sharp. If I look at the chromatic scale, I can see that C sharp is the next note above C. Goats can eat anything, so I need to go down to C. So in this case, I'm gonna loosen the tuning peg, and which direction you turn the peg is gonna depend on your ukulele, what style tuning machines you have. But just use your ear. Don't be afraid to go a little further and a little bit faster than maybe you will when you get close to the note. But just to hear which way it goes. Does it drop down like a dive bomb? Or does it go up in pitch? And And so from here, if I'm a little bit sharp, I can see that my needle is to the right. I'm just gonna descend until it's in the middle. And if you have an ukulele that's really far out of tune to get started, you might have to tune it several times as the strings kind of settle into their new places. A lot of times strings have a memory and they'll try to go back to where they were before you started tuning. So if you have one of your strings super high, it might try to continue to creep high to go back to where it was. This will just come with practice. The more you do it, the easier it will get. It's a little bit like a game. You just try and get that needle right in the middle. And if you're on a different note, look at the chromatic scale and try and figure out where you're at. And keep in mind that the chromatic scale is endless. We write it usually starting on an A note and ending on a G sharp. But after the G sharp is another A and it starts over again. And same for when you're at the bottom, it goes to a G sharp and it starts over again. So it goes around infinitely in a circle. Now that you are in tune, everything that you play will occur at a standard reference pitch that people will expect. If you go to play with somebody else, you'll be playing in the same range as them, and certainly, hopefully, your ukulele is in tune to itself. We talked briefly about picking and holding frets on your ukulele. Typically, the way that the ukulele is taught and played is as a strummed instrument where you hold a chord, which is a combination of fingerings, usually happening so that every string on the ukulele has a different sound. And you strum that chord so that you get a beautiful harmony and then you sing on top of it. For instance, with our picking exercise, we were only focusing on one finger in one place. But if you go to play a chord, you might have 4 different fingers in 4 different places, one on each string. And that is going to increase the difficulty. It's the same concept. You're still gonna try and fret in that fret and a little bit on the high side if possible. If anything, it's more important to pay attention to having your fingers higher inside the frets when you play chords, because getting an even finger pressure is harder with every finger that you add. A chord is just a finger configuration that you hold down and then strum to get a nice sound. Okay, so the first chord that most people will learn is C, and this is where you put your 3rd finger on your left hand on the 3rd fret of the bottom string, the A string closest to the floor. Goats can't eat anything. So 3rd fret on the A string. And you hold this down a little bit higher up if possible. And in order to hold the chord strongly, you want to have something to squeeze against. So, as a human hand, if you go to pick something up, you're going to be picking up between your fingers and your thumb, right? So depending on which chord you're holding, how you're holding it, you're going to do kind of the same thing with the ukulele neck. Hold the notes on the front. In this case, it's just one finger. And on the back, your thumb is going to provide a squeezing motion so that you can squeeze your fingers together to create a solid contact. With C, you're playing on the 3rd fret of the bottom string. And to strum this, you can take your index finger. Strumming is a little different from picking. Usually the motion to start the sound is different. With picking, you just have your thumb and you drop it through the string. With strumming, you're trying to hit all of the strings at once. And you can use your thumb. But a lot of times it's nice to get started early with your index finger, because as you get into more complicated strums down the road, you're typically going to want to strum with your index finger. So what you do is you maybe make an L with your right hand, and then you let the air out of it so that you have your thumb kind of sticking out and your index finger is bent. It has a little bit of a bend to it. And then when you hit the strings, your index finger is curling up so that it's kind of pointing at maybe your neck or your chin. Because what's gonna happen is as you cross the strings with that finger, if you drop your hand down and you let the index finger brush all the strings, you wanna be relaxed and the finger should be loose so that the finger, each time it hits a string, kind of bounces. It has a little bit of wiggle to it. You don't wanna hold it stiff so that it's like doing finger pull-ups on the strings. You don't want to create that motion because then you're gonna you create kind of a nasty sound, but also if your angle isn't right, you can stick your fingers in the strings as you're moving with momentum and it can, damage your finger and hurt. So curl your finger so that when you hit the strings, it just glides, because you get a little bit of an angle across the back of your fingernail. You hit the strings with the back of your fingernail and you get a nice sound. Don't hold the finger stiff, let it bounce. So you can strum down, practice strumming down. And when you go down, of course, you have to come up in order to go down again. So you're gonna just bring your hand up, back to the top, and go around in a circle. Try and keep it even and stay relaxed. And as you move on to learning new songs and new chords, a lot of times you're going to see a chord diagram. And a chord diagram is laid out so that on the left side, it's like the ukulele was turned upright. And so on the left side, you're going to have the G string represented as a line, and then the C string, then the E string, then the A string. Those are your vertical lines going across the chord diagram. So G, C, E, A, and then the horizontal lines are typically the nut. The first line at the very top is the nut, and then you have fret, 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 fret. So for C, that would look in a chord diagram something like this if I put it up on screen. That dot shows where your finger is going to go, and sometimes the dots have numbers in them that show your fingers. But typically, you just kind of use your intuition and trial and error to figure out which fingers to use. If we move on to our next chord, a C7 on the first fret, it's gonna look like this, and you hold it with the same principle. The only difference is that instead of your ring finger, you'll typically use your first finger. So that's how that would look on a chord diagram. Okay, and this is C7. A 7 is just like a variation on the major C chord, and it makes it a little bit bluesier sounding, a little bit twangy. That's standard major chord, and that's the C7th. And then from there, one more chord and then we can play a song. You would play F, and F uses two fingers. The most important of them is your first finger, pointer finger, is gonna go on the first fret of the second string. The ukulele strings are counted from the bottom as one. So it's like the stories of a building. So 1, 2, 3, 4 is the order of your strings. So the second string is the second from the bottom, not the second from the top, which is confusing at first. So second string with your first finger is going to hold the first fret. And then you're gonna reach with your middle finger to the top string, second fret. The top string is the fourth string, right? If we're thinking about string numbers. This is F major. So if we were to practice strumming that one, just nice and steady, keep your finger loose. Now, typically when playing ukulele, you're going to change between chords. So you have to make the fingering movements as the song is going along. A lot of times you're going to be playing in 4/4 time. So you're gonna get 4 strums per bar of music. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you start another bar. So it's always counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That would be 4 bars of music. And you're not always gonna change chords when a new bar starts, but a lot of times that's where you will change if you're gonna make a chord change. Say I was going to play 2 bars of the F major chord and then 2 bars of the C7 chord. You would count it like this. We're gonna strum, I'll count in 1, 2, 3, 4 to get us started. 1, 2, 3, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3. And then when we go to C7, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, then back to F. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and then switch to C7, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Usually, when you're playing through chords and you're moving from one chord to the next, you're gonna need a couple of different tips and helpers to help you get to the next chord. The first, of course, is just muscle memory, is doing it a lot. The next is always looking ahead to the next chord, because once your fingers are in the correct placement, so if I put my fingers in place for F and they're there, I just don't move and I can think about something else. I don't have to think F, 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 F. The hand's already doing that motion. I can think about something else. So the best thing to think about is usually what chord is going to come next and how am I going to move my fingers to that location. So if I'm on F, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, I'm thinking about C7, so I'm ready to go to the next chord. And vice versa, if I'm going back to F from C7, I'm thinking about F. And a lot of times, if it's possible, you can, like going from F to C7, you can't necessarily hover your fingers because you're using your first finger for F, you're also going to use your first finger for C7. So you just have to make that change and get that first finger around down to the next string. But when going from C7 to F, I'm also going to need to add my middle finger back on again. So instead of just waiting on C7 all the way till the end, 3, 4, and then scrambling to move my fingers, what you can do is even while you're playing C7 or whatever chord, you can hover any unused fingers from that chord over where they're going to go in the next change. So if I'm going back to F, I can't move my index finger, otherwise I would be abandoning the C7. I'm just gonna hop it when it's time to change, but I can hover my middle finger. So I can get that ready, kind of primed. You're getting ready to make that change with your middle finger, so that when it's time to go to F, it's less movement that you have to make. You just drop that finger on and shift your index finger up, okay? So chord changes are the hardest thing that you're going to be doing with an ukulele as you get started. It's many things happening at once. You have to think about strumming, you have to think about moving through the chords, you have to think about getting your fingers to the right place. But if you can start out with the guidelines of look ahead, always look ahead and see what's coming next, because you don't need to think about what you're already doing. That's just happening. You just let it happen. So think ahead to what your next chord change is going to be and how your fingers are going to move. This might include adding on or hovering your fingers to get ready to go to that next change. If you're on C7, hover your middle finger so that you're ready to go to F. Another change we could make is we could go from F to C major, normal C on the 3rd fret. And in this case, we're completely swapping our fingers. So we can use the hover method and thinking ahead to really be ready for that C change. So I'm gonna hover my 3rd finger so that it is ready to go to C. And when it's time to get off the F chord, all we have to do is swap our fingers. And then same thing goes for going back to F. I can hover my 2 first fingers, and then when it's time, I just swap the fingers, okay? So if I have, again, 2 bars of F and 2 bars of C major this time, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, hovering, ready, switch to C, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, now I'm hovering, thinking ahead, and F. So it's all, you try and get as much of your work kind of done ahead of time as possible, so that when you have to go to the chord and you have to actually change in time, that you're ready. You've done as much preparation work as you can, so that when it's time to change, you just flip the switch and boom, you move to the next chord. Because a lot of folks, they're just stuck thinking about what chord they're on. And that's all they can think about. And they focus on right till the last minute, and then they panic when they have to go to the next chord. Don't do that. Think ahead. Plan ahead. We could learn any number of 2-chord songs that only use F and C7. I'll put a link in the description for a list of 10 of those that I've arranged for you. But I'd rather do something that's a little bit more interesting than your run-of-the-mill traditional songs. It's a song called Kilakila or Haleakalā, and I've been teaching this to my students at the elementary school here in Waimea lately. And it's been super fun, and it's just F and C7. It sounds a little bit like this, so you can follow along. Watch what chords I'm doing at which point. Kilakila o Haleakalā, kua hivi nani o Maui, ha'aheo oi Hawaii, hano hano o Maui no ka'oi. So even if you aren't familiar with the Hawaiian language and you can't follow the words themselves, you can still follow the timing of the song by counting bars. And this is really good practice because a lot of people get stuck, especially when you start looking up your own songs and songs that you want to play. You're gonna see lyric sheets with chords above them. And this gives you a general idea of where the chords change, but if you're not counting, you don't know exactly where the chord is going to go. So instead of guessing, you can get used to counting bars and assessing where the most likely place chord changes are going to happen are. So in this case, Kilakila o Haleakalā, we have 3 bars of F. Da 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 na 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 2 3 da 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 da. So 3 bars, and then we change to C7. And then from there, we're gonna have 3 bars of C7 before we change back to F. Da 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 F. And then usually to kind of give you some run out room at the end of the verse, you're gonna play F for 1 additional bar. So if we start on F, and I'll count you in, and I'll sing through it, try and count to navigate when the chord changes are going to happen. And if you don't have an ukulele, just tap it out so you can count in your head what the timing is before we make those moves to the next chords. So in this song, when I count in, there's actually a pickup. So I'm gonna start singing Kilakila on beat 4. So I'm only gonna count 1, 2, 3, Kilakila. And then when we get to the second, Kila is the 1 beat, all right? So on F, 1, 2, 3. Kilakila o Haleakalā, kua hiwi nani o Maui, ha'aheo oe Hawaii, hano hano o Maui no ka oe, 2, 3, Kilakila o Haleakalā. It goes around again. Kua hiwi nani o Maui, ha'aheo oe Hawaii, hano hano o Maui no ka oe. And a classic ending is to go bump, bump. So you go 1, 2 on your last chord and you stop the song. So in this case, we're going back to F, so we're gonna stop on F. So, hano hano o Maui no ka oe, bump, bump. And typically with a classic Hawaiian song like that, it's just gonna be a verse, verse, verse pattern. So the only thing that changes are the words. So once you learn how the chords move, the chord timing, the chord changes, everything that has to do with the strumming and the chords, it's all gonna be the same. The only thing that changes is the words you put on top of them. So even if you've heard Kilakila o Haleakalā and you're familiar with hearing that verse, if you go to the next verse, Kau hale o ka'au, and you have different words, you don't have to panic because you know it's going to be the same thing again for you as the rhythm ukulele player, as the strummer. So when in doubt, count your bars and figure out where the chord changes are going to happen in relation to the structure of the rhythm and the structure of the timing. Because if you start downloading sheets and you see random chords on top of lyrics, if you're singing a long phrase and you're singing a word, love, that chord change could happen anywhere in there and you have no idea where that is if you're only looking at where the chord is on that lyric sheet. Instead, if you're counting, love, boom, then you know exactly where your change is going to be. The internet is full of terrible advice, but it's also full of a ton of resources that are mostly correct that you can follow and download for free. You can go to my website, liveukulele.com, and find a whole section on just strummed songs. There's also tablature if you want to get into some picking of melodies, or you can go on Google and search song name chords. And a lot of times it'll pull up a guitar site like ultimateguitar.com tends to be pretty good. Guitar chords are the same chords as ukulele chords. So even if it's a sheet meant for guitar, as long as it shows the chord changes above the lyrics, then you can follow along with your ukulele and use the same chords. All you're gonna need is a chord chart, which shows the diagrams for a number of different chords. So you can take the two pieces together. You can take a sheet that has chords maybe that you don't know, but it's a song that you like. And you can learn the chords, work your way through learning what the chord shapes are, what the fingerings are from the chord diagrams on a chord chart. There's a chord chart linked down below as well. So count, look ahead, and make sure your ukulele is in tune, and you'll be in great shape to start playing If this was helpful, please like and subscribe to my channel and check out some of my other videos. There's a whole beginner bootcamp playlist that I will also link down below where I walk through in an even slower pace how to play some simple songs. It's a great kind of primer to go into more detail on some of these different things. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to catch you next time. Aloha.